I'm Jessie Banhazl. I'm the creative director of My Hungry Traveler, which is a comprehensive recipe collection and a way for people to connect to international cuisine through their home kitchen.
Jessie, I haven't seen you in forever. So literally, I at the beginning I was like, don't use dates and stuff like that. I'm like, what's a podcast? So I'm gonna say it. You're my first interview of the Happy New Year. Happy New Year. There's a lot of people that are going to be airing that are out of order, but it doesn't matter because you're not here for the time of when they do it. You're here for literally to hear the story of the individual that's the rock star. So Happy New Year, my friend.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Jessie and I have known each other for a couple of years, and you'll find out why and how we learned, or how we met each other. Amazing of what you do. But I always say, before we even get to know how I met you or even what you do now, let's talk about who you are. So where are you from? Who are you? Family, friends, etc. Up till the time when you're in college.
Up to college. Okay. So I grew up in Wayland, Massachusetts. So I am from the Metro West Boston area. And my parents are from the New York area and the North Shore of Massachusetts. And so I grew up there and I went to college at Smith College in Western Mass.
That was a very short version there. So, which is fine. What did you go to school for? What was your major?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm like, what was my teenage self even like?
I know, exactly. What was your teenager?
I was like, I don't know. I was a student athlete. I did some theater stuff. But in college, I got a degree in sociology and studio art, interestingly enough. So I have a dual degree in visual arts and also in sociology, which actually both of those things have been really important in entrepreneurship, which I obviously, like, at the time didn't really foresee that direction, but now looking back, I'm like, oh well, yeah, like these are like the fundamental cornerstones to marketing, is sociology and visual arts.
It's so funny that you say that. So I'm a double major as well. So it's communication journalism and sociology as my undergrad. And it was so funny because I was communications because I'm a talker. And so everyone just assumed I don't know what she's going to do with this, but great, she's communications. And everyone asked me why did you fall into sociology? I'm like, I don't know. The classes just were fun. They were fun. They were engaging. They made sense to me. For who I am, they just made sense. And so passing them was just it didn't take much to pass a sociology class for me. And I'm sure you found the same exact way. I feel that sociology and psychology, everyone should have as a double major.
Oh, yeah. I think it gives you a better understanding of people as a whole. I really liked sociology because I think that I just generally am interested in why people do what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I had thought, I guess in college, I kind of thought that I would end up in advertising. That was kind of my general career trajectory.
Wait, a what?
In advertising.
Oh, yeah.
I had this vision of being kind of like a creative director at an ad agency, which I learned pretty quickly after college that was not actually something that I wanted to do, and nor would they let me.
Mm-hmm.
It was there was massive gates at the door for that kind of work. So I was like, okay, I'm going to give up on that. But, it was the idea of kind of understanding what makes people, act the way that they do, and kind of how can you, kind of engage with that. And at the time I didn't really think about it as manipulating people, but now I realize it's kind of what it is.
No, the thing is, I wouldn't think about manipulating. So for me, I'm first generation born in America. I love watching people. I was that kid where it's back in the day before 9/11, you can go to the airport and you can just watch people when they're leaving. Oh my God, the tears. And when they're coming back, oh my God, I'm so excited. Being at the Met and just sitting and watching people in New York. I am the biggest fan of people watching, just sitting back and just watching people. And even now I say, I like watching the humans in the Petri dish. I like to see how they react to certain things. And you just throw a little something into the Petri dish and people either lose their minds or they're super, super elated. And so sociology just made sense where I didn't know why it wasn't a requirement. I felt like it should have been a requirement because sociology, because I need to know who I am, and sociology, because I need to understand other people and how I fit into the mix. And again, it was just it just made sense in my brain where I think we should all do this. And when I hear someone takes it, I'm like, already like you already, but I'm loving you even more.
Nice. I agree. Ditto.
So why did you get, I mean, why did you go that route? Because you fast forward to your parents, but but why did you go that route of these majors? I mean, there's so many different things. I mean, obviously there's like a plethora of majors and studies that you can go after. What gravitated you towards those two?
Sure. So I actually, it's funny, like you mentioned pre-college, and it's like all of a sudden, like my brain is reforming myself as a youth as we speak. And I was big into art. So I was like, I did a lot of different art programs when I was in high school. And I actually there was an all-state program for art in Massachusetts. So I got accepted to like Art All-State when I was in high school. And so art, like visual arts and doing art was like a big part of my life. And I kind of like went into school intending on being a visual arts major. And I think that I was realizing that I wanted to have something that was a little bit more comprehensive in terms of like, I don't know, like reading and writing and things that aren't just specifically like making things with your hands, you know, while we're paying to be in college. Just like, so I started, and I think I'm just genuinely was fascinated with anthropology and sociology and those kinds of things. So I definitely didn't envision like I said, like I thought I would go into advertising, but there was never really a career trajectory for me with those decisions. I like generally have not had a career trajectory. I've kind of like fallen into a lot of stuff. Like kind of fast forwarding to now, I'm doing like 800 different things. So I'm not one of those people who's like, I'm going to be a doctor, like I'm going to be this. It's kind of just been like, go with the flow of it, see where things take me. And like you, I just found it really fascinating. So it's sociology really fascinating. So I was excited at the idea of taking classes about the sociology of like rock music or like different just general like statistics and the way that those work and things like that.
I think that overall, everyone and everything has a story, and there are so many people that are interconnected to it. And so whenever someone only focuses on like, oh, Jimi Hendrix, I'm like, but Jimi Hendrix became Jimi Hendrix because there's so many other things that happened. I mean, the pebble got thrown into the water, and the ripple effects of what happened to get Jimi Hendrix to be where he is a big deal. And everyone's like, oh, I really like Jimi Hendrix. I'm like, but there's more to the story. It's like, I mean, literally like where I was just reading The Dirtiest Job. Oh God, I forgot his name. But it literally, like, it was a TV show called The Dirtiest Jobs. And he would basically go and follow individuals that have normal everyday jobs, but they go to work clean and they come home dirty because they're doing these things that if they didn't do it, we're not living. Like the sewage cleaner, the plumber, like there are individuals that are taking care of us and we're not even paying attention to them. But I mean, one of the things that he had said was how there's so many, there's always an ending to a story. There's like, you see it, you use it, you buy it, it's part of your life, but you don't know how we got here. Like whether it's like a former pie maker that created, like literally they were like kind of like bored, they weren't doing anything, and they were tossing around the pie tin, and that became the frisbee. So like all these things that we have, and we just think, oh, they just came out of nowhere. No, there's the end of the story to it. So it's just like the whole entire concept of where did you begin? How did you start? What did you see that got you to where you are? And also, of course, that links to are there artists in your family? Because you are where you are, you gravitated towards art and sociology, but is there someone in your family that is already an artist or architect or something like that?
Yeah, my mom. So
there's always a link. There's always the link.
Oh yeah. And like, I mean, and like, we haven't talked about it yet, but the reason that I'm doing kind of the work the reason I did Green City Growers, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, but, and then ended up kind of doing My Hungry Traveler with my dad is like all kind of interconnected. My parents are definitely like hugely a part of me as a person. But my mom has always been an artist, and my mom owns a patent for the process for firing images onto ceramic. So it's a printer paper that you can print anything on and then put into a kiln, and you can fire the images. It's called fired on images.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, and so lots of her process is used on Etsy or different pieces. So there are different artists using her paper and her process to create art. So she has like an Instagram account though, where she's posting kind of people's pictures of the work that people are doing with her process. And what's the name of her, what is it?
Fired on Images.
And she and right now they're airing a commercial on Etsy that showcases her process. It showcases people. A lot of times people use it to like take family recipes or like documents or pictures, and to commemorate an event.
It's a decal.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's like the cool. All right, so I have seen these, but I didn't even think that it was.
Yeah,
nice.
so she invented the process for doing it. So
that's amazing.
So her kind of interest in doing and crafting and interest in the idea, she wanted to do this for herself. She's like, I would love to make some gifts with like, we have all these handwritten recipes from, our family members and that are, back to, generation on generation on generation. It's like, how can we I would love to commemorate this. I would love to like put it on a plate. And there was no kind of process to do so. And so she invented it, which is super cool.
So one just says, so can I just like take a picture, send it to her, and then?
You would send it to one of the artists that's using her process. So if you go on like Etsy, for example, there's a number of people selling products that are customized. And so you can kind of like look at, my mom's on Instagram as well, like Fired on Images is on Instagram. And on Instagram, she reposts artists using her process. So you can see examples and you can look those people up and purchase products from them.
Oh my God.
From the artist directly.
Huge shout out to Mom and Fired on Images.
Terry Banhazl. Shout out to Terry, Fired on Images.
That is a funny, because I'm looking at it and I'm like, I've seen this like all the time. I never knew. So yay for your mom. You know what? Again, your mom solving a problem. She had a problem and she solved it. That's what we do as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and I mean, my parents are probably the core reason I am an entrepreneur, because they're both entrepreneurs. So it's like both of them have, run small businesses. My dad did a lot of startups, tech startups in the 80s and 90s. So it's like they're both like very, very instrumental to that. And I think, they were a huge catalyst when I began my first company, Green City Growers, because, a friend of mine was like, hey, do you want to start this urban farming business with me? And I was living with them at the time. I had like moved out of New York City and I didn't have anywhere to stay. And so I'm like living with my parents at 24. And, I was like, what do you think about me starting this business? And they both were like, sure. Like they're like, that sounds like a great idea.
You mean like, I go, wait, you mean that if you had gone to your parents and you said, I want to be a doctor, lawyer, and engineer, they're like, oh, really?
Yeah, maybe. But they didn't shut it down. Like they weren't like, oh, great. She wants to do this like really risky thing, like that potentially like may not lead to anything and may like, cost money. And, so it's like, oh, great. You're going to like jump off a cliff, like for a living, like,
every day. That's what we do every day.
Go for it.
I always say that being an entrepreneur is like jumping in a pool head first, knowing that there's no water.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
All right. So now we know where the entrepreneurship comes from, which I love. You're in college. You have your majors, art and sociology. Where does it go from there? Like you graduate, what happens next?
So what happens next is I moved from college to New York City. My family's from the area. It seemed like a good place to go to do creative, to do things that were creative and to potentially find some work. And also like all through college and actually through to now, I have also like made money being like a server or a bartender. And so, moved to New York, working as a bartender, and I landed an internship with the Food Network. So I worked for a production company, doing development and doing production for a couple of Food Network shows, specifically the Bobby Flay shows. So like Throw Down with Bobby Flay, and it was great. It was really interesting. And I was like, okay, I think maybe I'll work in television production. And, started to kind of, that internship ended, I started looking for work. And so I ended up freelancing and working in reality TV for a few years. I most notably worked on the show Wife Swap. But I also worked on The Hill. Yeah. Worked on The Hills.
You know what? The only way that I would be even more horrified if you had said that you worked for what was that reality show? It's something, not Unicorn, but it's like they pick someone. They pick someone and then they have plastic surgery.
I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
That's when my heart and soul just broke in so many pieces, because Wife
Yeah.
Swap was one bad thing because I mean I'm anti reality shows, and I saw the previews and I'm like, that's a great book. As a former TV producer, great TV, it's a great hook because I would watch it if I didn't know already that the hook is always better than the show. But it was just like that one and that the one where like they broke. I mean, cause the show got canceled because like one of the girls committed suicide because you can change the front, but you still have to change the internal. And if you can't change the internal, it doesn't matter. But I just remember those shows and I'm like, what are we doing to ourselves?
Yeah, and working on it was no better, honestly. So I definitely, I mean, it was fascinating. You know, this sociology major is working on a sociological experiment reality television show.
Yep.
So at a certain point, you know, I was like pretty fascinated by what was going on, but you know, I felt pretty bad about what, you know, was taking place. Like there was like a lot of manipulation, there was a lot of intentional, you know, kind of guiding and manipulating of the individuals who were participating in the shows. And you know, the TV, as you know, I mean, TV production as a industry can be really cutthroat and really terrible.
Oh yeah,
like
it's hard. It's a lot of work. I mean, and mind you, I worked at a news station, but I mean, I was in TV and radio, and I can't even imagine a TV show versus the news and a morning show.
Yeah, because also the show, you know, the shows I worked on, you know, you were freelancing. A lot of times, you know, it was a day rate and the hours would go way over. In the case of Wife Swap, we were traveling. And so, you know, you were living in a hotel, they were giving you 4 hours of sleep. I mean, a lot of like the reckonings that are happening in certain industries, like are, you know, obviously well-founded. And this kind of, there is a current reckoning in the film industry about, you know, livable wages and, you know, labor laws and things like that.
Wait, can you just
relative
can you just like explain? Can you explain? Because I mean, in photography world, I know day rate. So look, I'm just assuming the same. But can you explain to everyone the day rate and what that means when you go into overtime and what happened for you?
Oh, sure. So a day rate would be just a flat rate. So it'd be like, you know, you're going to work for $150 for the day. But there's no assumption or there's no consistency in how many hours that is. So it's not like, oh, you can expect an 8-hour day for 150. In fact, a lot of these days are, you know, 12, 13 hours. And so you start to actually go underneath the minimum wage. So you start to, you know, working for $9, $8 an hour for something that's like really intense work. So, you know, that was a lot for me. I think that like the combination of working and I really, it's funny, it's like, again, like I like had this vision that I was gonna like work in advertising or this vision that I was gonna, you know, work in reality television. And then I get into these things and I'm like, I don't think I can do this. Like, because I feel like I have more like empathy and like, and I don't feel like this is fulfilling like anything for me in terms of how I want to be putting my energy out into the world and the kind of thing I want to be presenting, how I want to be presenting myself and what I want to be like kind of working on.
Right.
So that was a huge like kind of aha moment for me generally about like kind of what kind of work I wanted to be doing. The reality stuff, I was like, I can't, you know, if I'm going to stay in TV, I loved the Food Network work. I really did. And I've always been passionate about food. And I grew up in a household with a dad who made all of this like really interesting international cuisine. And I was always like excited about trying new foods and going to restaurants and cooking. And so it's like, how can I kind of like turn that into a career? And so I started looking for jobs like in you know, more permanent jobs in food television and doing that kind of work.
Why didn't you stay with the food? I mean, with Bobby Flay?
It was an internship. I tried. I applied to like every open position that they had and it just didn't work out. It was like the timing was wrong. They liked me, I think. They told me that they did. And I liked them a lot. It was this company, Embassy Row Factual. And, you know, there was no opening. So they did, you know, everyone was so helpful in getting me this freelance work. So really appreciated it. But, you know, things are tough, like with it's a lot of people applying for the same jobs. And it was just a, you know, very intense industry. And I applied. Finally, I gave up on living in New York because I was just like cobbling together all this work. And it's like barely making my rent. And, you know, I had a boyfriend break up with me. And I was like, I'm done.
I'm done.
Threw in the towel.
This is
I was like, I can't live here anymore.
the telling sign.
No, and like New York is just so unrelenting. It's like you're like, you know, you're like crying and like you can't like cry in private. You know, it's like you're either like you're on the street, everyone can see you, or like in the subway, or you're in your home, but it's like you can hear all the apartments around you. Like, you know. So it was just like, I just felt like the place just beat me up. And like, I love New York City, but I was like, it's time, you know, I moved home. I moved home with my parents, my tail between my legs. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so I did actually continue to do TV production after I moved home. I did a couple freelance jobs, really fun in Massachusetts. So worked for a company based out of Kenmore Square that did industrials are like videos for, like we made a bunch of videos for Kodak that came with a camera that you purchased. So like they kind of showed you how to use the camera. And you know, those kinds of things.
They're the best. They're the old version of YouTube now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, they make different like how-to videos essentially for companies. And so that was great. And I worked on a game show that was
Which one?
It only aired for like one episode. It was executive produced by Ashton Kutcher. And it was something like the family, like you opened your front door and they had created the set and it was like right outside your door. And it was kind of like family, I don't even know. It's like kind of like they asked you questions about how well you knew your family members. And like it didn't last long. But
even with the Ashton Kutcher, you realize he tried it didn't work, and he's like, it goes next, punked.
Oh yeah, yeah. And so it was like, it was funny. Yeah, it was. Anyway, that was fun. Worked on that show, and around that time is when a friend of mine from college contacted me and was like, "What do you think about like starting an urban farming company?" And I'm like, I don't know anything about it.
You're like, I go, wait, what? Like,
yeah, I was like,
wait. I gotta know. Why did they pick you? I mean, why did all of a sudden? Like, what was the link?
That's always going to be like the big, like, I don't know, like universal mystery to Green City growers is always going to be, why did Gabe call me? Like, it will. It's like whatever the universe just like made a decision. I think for him, like, you know, I was always kind of one of the more organized people of our friends in college. I was like the responsible one. I was the one with the car. I was the one with the job off campus. You know, I was just like this individual who like seemed, I think, maybe to have it a little bit more together than the other 20-year-olds in school. So like I, you know, this is a friend of mine who went to Hampshire College. So I went to Smith. He had been on the West Coast and had seen businesses starting up that were installing vegetable gardens for people and charging to maintain it, like charging to install them and maintain them, and moved back to Boston and was kind of like, I think we could do this here. And didn't, I think, have anybody, knew he needed a business partner and just knew I lived in the area and had recently moved back. And so called me and was like, do you want to do this? And I was like, okay, like, let me think about it. I don't know anything about growing. I've never grown anything in my life. You know, I'd always like identified as being like a black thumb. You know, when you like take that on as an identity, I'm like, oh, I'm a black thumb.
That would have been me.
All my plants.
No, that's 100% me, because I mean, like literally, like my dad could grow anything. I mean, like literally when he was alive, like mango trees, like flowers and roses, everything could be done. Yeah. Cactus. Give me a cactus and I'm good.
Yeah. I was like, I don't grow things, you know, and it was like part of my identity. It was like, I'm this urban person, you know, like I'm the person who lives in New York and like doesn't grow things. And so, and he's like, here, you know, like read this book. He's like, just read this book and it might help kind of like ground you in what this concept is. And he gave me The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan, which is a great book that is about the history of the American food system. So essentially, it kind of like lays out a lot of how we ended up where we are with a kind of obesity epidemic and just generally like concerns around like how food is produced and if it's sustainable or not. and like other issues around like what we put in our foods, like preservatives and things like that. And so the book was really interesting. And one of the conclusions to the book was grow your own food. Like one of the things that you can do is, even if a small percentage of your food is grown at home, like just in your tiny little backyard, or like, the closer you can get to your own home and where in the food that you're producing, kind of the better it is for the environment, and the better it is for your own personal health. I was like, this makes a lot of sense. Like, this is really, really it's practical. It makes total sense to me. And I always loved cooking. And so I was like, well, also, like, if you are growing food in your yard, I mean, if anybody who has a garden knows it tastes better than the food that you get at the grocery store.
Always. I mean, obviously we know this from the tomato. I mean, I can never buy a tomato at the supermarket ever again because the taste is so bad.
Yeah, it's not even the same thing. And so if you grow food at home, you know that it tastes better. And then if you go to really nice restaurants, the reason they're good is because they're using fresh ingredients most of the time. And so it's like, that is like, okay, this makes sense on like multiple levels, and it meets at a place of passion for me in the cooking element of it, even though I have no experience growing anything. And so I was like, you grow the things and, build the stuff, and I'll kind of do the back end management. And about a year in, Gabe left, and I kept going, and kind of ended up hiring some individuals with horticultural backgrounds, and like just kept going and going and going and going.
And that's when I met you, because I was so fascinated because I had heard about you. And then I was like, I mean, mind you, I can't remember exactly where we met.
We met at the Kendall Venture Cafe.
Oh, Venture Cafe. Okay. And I just remember hearing about what you did. I'm like, well, that is the craziest thing I've ever did, because I think that's when you just got partnership with Fenway.
Yeah. So I mean, things when it's so funny, so Green City Growers is still in business. I founded it in 2008. So it's been 13 years now.
So tell people what it is. I mean, what it is now, what it was then and what it is now.
Yeah. So when I started it with Gabe, we were mostly installing raised bed vegetable gardens and maintaining them for people at their homes. So like mostly like Greater Boston, putting in garden beds and, coming and planting and maintaining them. And then kind of progressively as the company grew, we started to do this on a commercial level. And so we started putting in garden beds for corporate campuses and running employee wellness programs for the staff, and doing restaurants and food service programs as well. So like planting larger gardens or really small scale farms for, the food service company, a food service company or a restaurant or a cafeteria on a corporate campus. So, and then we started doing school garden programs, and then we started doing programs for like a living, organizations. And it just like kind of continually grew and grew. And then in 2013, we put in a rooftop farm for Whole Foods Market in Linfield, Mass, which is the largest rooftop farm in New England. And then from that kind of like milestone, at the time, we also did Mass Challenge. So that was like a big kind of catalyst for the company. And then we ended up winning an award for Mass Challenge for social impact from the John Henry Foundation. And through that connection, ended up with our rooftop farm at Fenway Park, which is what the company is most known for. So we have a 5,000 square foot rooftop farm that's parallel to the third baseline at Fenway. Check it out.
Which is cool. So I've seen it many times, because whenever I'm up there in the suites, yes, I go. I have friends that have a suite that I'm lucky to be up there. I'm blown, because whenever I look, I giggle. I'm like, I know who did that.
Yeah,
it's fun to know where it came from.
Yeah, every time I'm there, it's like, I can't even believe that it's there. And what's great is in this past year, Green City Growers has also put in a miniature version of Fenway Farms at the Boston Children's Museum, which is an exhibit at the museum, the living, working exhibit at the museum. And then we also did an installation for the Museum of Fine Arts. So it's like all of the greater Boston cultural institutions are kind of taking on these for urban farms, which is super cool. So it's like, we started this dinky little business. And then, at this point, Green City Growers is about 20 employees. We got acquired
Wait. Before we even get there, I got it. So before you got acquired, how many did you have? How many, farms did you have? And like, you have 20 people. How do you maintain that? I mean, so how many did you have? And how do you maintain making sure that everyone's gardening? Because at peak season, it's constantly needing attention.
Yeah, there was around 130 different locations, regional. So it's not just Boston. We've got sites in New York area, in Rhode Island, Connecticut as well, and are actually expanding to other states in the U.S. as well, where we have an individual who works in those locations maintaining the gardens. So some of the keys to being able to maintain that many locations are drip irrigation, so automated watering systems, and different technologies to ensure that things are kind of as much as you can automate it and as much as you can control it in a way where you don't have to manually water or check in on the gardens. That helps. Some of the smaller ones, we only do bi-weekly visits. Some of the larger ones, we're there 3 days a week, like Fenway Farms. So, it's really a combination of kind of a geographic efficiency as well, and logistics, and kind of sending people on these routes to hit different locations. It's complicated for sure. But it seems to all kind of, the puzzle pieces all come together in a way where you can do it with not a huge staff.
How did you, I'm listening to the story, and it's fascinating how the black thumb becomes Mother Nature's assistant. Not even the green thumb, your Mother Nature's assistant. How did that evolution for you? How did that feel for you? Because there's so many individuals that are, as you're seeing, millions of people are leaving jobs, millions of people. They go where in the past, during a recession, during a downward turn, couple hundred, couple thousand. But at this point, we're at 12 million people, because every month there's another 4 or 5 million people that are walking off high-paying jobs. And so they're trying to create this thing, and yet they're walking in, I don't know anything about this industry. And you walk in, you know nothing about this industry whatsoever. You're approached because you're organized, and then now you are literally Mother Nature's assistant. So how was that for you in regards of the learning curve, and in regards of when people look to you for help? I want to do something like this too, not your industry, but something in another industry.
Yeah, it's so funny. When I launched this business, my friends from college laughed out loud about it. They were like, "Are you kidding? You're the urban hipster," And I'm like, I don't know. It seems cool. I like the concept, and it's good for the environment and good for people, and so, I think for me, a lot of the way that the learning curve was huge, and a lot of how I managed that was reaching out for help. So I applied to every business accelerator program that came my way. I set up an advisory team. I was just constantly kind of connecting with people who knew better about, X, Y, or Z, to ensure that I could kind of fill in the knowledge gaps and what I didn't know, as we were kind of growing. And it was exciting. When I started Green City Growers in 2009, people didn't know what urban farming was. People weren't growing vegetables in their yard. They're like, why wouldn't I just go to the grocery store?
But you say that, you say that because, in New York, you were in New York. There are areas where they were dilapidated, and people just in order for big buildings for them not to be built, there was a team of people. They're probably in their 60s and 70s. They did an entire show about this, about how they would take seeds and throw them over the fence, and things would grow. Hey, we'll go in that area and clean it up if you don't build a big building. And now New York has the most property in regards of gardening. So there's community gardens in all different places, and obviously in Fenway area, there's a lot of areas. So in Cambridge, is a lot of areas. So these things existed, but I don't think they didn't have a name for it.
No, community gardening too is huge in the 70s. It's just and in the 40s, during World War II, but it's it goes through these ebbs and flows of people not knowing. We just became so detached from essentially the food system and where food is coming from. So we do so much, Green City Growers does so much youth gardening, and there's not a lot of education for kids, about where their food is coming from. and, come like, this is again, starting in 2008, people are like, I don't even know what this is. And then the Obama administration is like, Michelle Obama's like,
Yep.
I'm going to make my platform around getting kids to move and eat fresh fruits and vegetables with one of the ways that we're doing that is by having school garden education.
Yeah.
And so it was like, that was huge. There was like this, like from the highest kind of governmental level in the country, this push, like really, you should be taking this seriously. And that helped a lot, with awareness for sure. And then just generally it started trending towards people caring about this stuff, And so now everyone's like, knows what organic is, knows what these things are. But in 2008, they didn't, which is not that long ago, but it was a huge shift. So we were started before the curve. So, and there's like pros and cons of starting before the curve of any trend, being like the first person in is good in certain ways because you become kind of like the institution around it. But, there's so much uncertainty and you're like kind of carving the way for those behind you. And there's a lot of unknowns. A lot of times people were like, I've never seen your business model before. So therefore I can't like fit it into this whole, I really struggle with financing. Because of that, in fundraising and doing that kinds of things, people are like, I don't understand what this is. I've never seen it before. And so you're like, well, we're the first one to do it. But it doesn't mean it's not like, a viable operation. So I was always running up against.
That's a perfect, going back to the question of like, I go, how does one that doesn't know the industry go into it? And I go, and the learning curve is one thing. I can pick up a book, I can ask people, I can watch enough YouTube videos, but now I'm getting a lot of no's. I'm getting a lot of pushback. How did you get around that? Because that's the answer, that the golden ticket answer that everyone's looking for. Like I go, how do I get involved in doing something if I don't know how to talk about it to get someone to buy into it?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think that with Green City Growers is like, when you start having customers or you start having employees or you start having stakeholders in some capacity, whatever you want to define that as, investors or anything where people are engaged and they're kind of committed to you, you start to like realize you have to figure out your way around the wall. Like there's no real choice. So it's like throughout the years, I'd hit all of these different walls and be like, well, what's the alternative? Like, is the alternative to shut the business down? Well, we have 100 customers, like that's not really like an option. Or we have like, 15 employees or however many employees at the time, that their livelihoods are being paid by working for this business. Like this doesn't feel like the right way. And so, often like, also like hitting walls, it's like hitting a wall and just like walk away from the wall, like go into the other room, whatever, go to the gym, and like sit on it, wake up the next morning. And often it's like, okay, we can like come up with a solution here. So, like I also personally went into this, like, especially after many, many, many years of doing this. Like, I think like a lot of times people think when you're getting into entrepreneurship, there's this like, I think there's this like visioning of, it's going to be really hard for like 3 or 4 years. And then, you're going to sell it. And then like you're all, and then everything's like great. And I'm like, I was doing this for 13 years before it. And so, and like it almost didn't sell because of the pandemic. So it's like, it's like not always that simple. And so when you get on the treadmill, it's like, oh yeah, like 3 years from now, I can run this fast for 3 years, and then 3 years hits, and then 5 years hits, and then 7 years. So it's like a lot of, it was exhausting, really exhausting. But I definitely did not see a path forward other than just forward. Like I always say, like, I like to use the like analogy of like, if you're on a ship crossing the Atlantic, if you're halfway there and like, you're like, we can't make it. Which way do you go? Do you go forward or you go backwards? It's like, well, we might as well try. Like we might as well try to make it to the destination.
I do love that analogy.
Like, it's like, I always like describe entrepreneurship as being like in a ship in the middle of the ocean.
One of my advisors said to me, because for me, I always say like, once you hit 10 years, it's like, there you go. That's your mark. And I was like, so proud of myself. I go, we hit 10 years. I go, we're doing good. This is right before, this is December 2019. I'm like, yes, we are going into year 11. And he goes, you mean year 1? I'm like, no, year 11. He goes, no, now you know what you do and who you do it for. Now it's time to start your business. I'm like, damn it. Like,
Yeah.
so cruel.
Yeah, I understand that feeling. And I'm feeling really good about the kind of, Green Sea Growers is like no longer in my hands, and I'm feeling really positive about, that phase of the company, not under my leadership, is like actually a really nice feeling, to feel like, okay, I got it across the ocean and now it's going to live, it's going to thrive. And it's like, I don't have to sail the ship back.
Well, this is a great segue into like so this is a great segue where mom and dad are entrepreneurs, dad serial entrepreneur. You start your business knowing, like, I mean, this is like it's in my DNA, but this is so new for me. You survived 13 years. And so now you start a new business. Tell us about the new business, what it does, but also why did you go this route? Because when you get acquired, sometimes when people get acquired, they're like, I'm good. Yeah. I'm just going to sit back and just enjoy. You decide to jump right into something new.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this project, and this is a passion project for my father that I have signed on to, and I am 100% on board with. I'm also like, I can't. Sorry, I'm trying to remember. Was that like I'm not only the member, I'm like the owner, kind of moment.
Oh God, the guy that lost his hair and Cy Sterling, something like that.
Yeah, so I'm definitely like a big fan of My Hungry Traveler. So Green Sea Growers got acquired. We've been talking about this project for years. So my dad's a passionate cook. He traveled a lot in the 80s and 90s for work, a lot to Asia, all over Asia, all over different parts of Europe, kind of like all over the world, really. And in that experience, he started to really like enjoy eating the kind of like regional, traditional foods of these places that he visited. And so he was really excited, about the kind of food he was trying. And he'd get back to the United States and was like, how do I recreate this at home? And so, this is before Amazon. This is before, kind of easier access to international ingredients. And so, he'd be mail ordering things from like from China, or like kind of just like bringing things home with him on his travels, and then kind of recreating these dishes and then serving them to, me and my little brother and my mom. And so I grew up like with a really interesting cuisine, served to us. Like I had a lot of Szechuan food as a child. Like we'd make, you'd bring like a potluck to elementary school, and I'd bring some like Indonesian dish, and everyone's just like, where is this coming from? And so that's like a part of my identity, and it's obviously a part of my father's identity. And so he is retired and was kind of looking at what he could be doing, and the idea of taking these recipes and making them available to the public, and kind of creating a database and collection that allows people to be cooking these Peter Banhazl recipes that are his adaptations of these traditional recipes that he's been working on for years. I mean, essentially, he's been doing this almost his entire life. And so I have experience with front-end web development from Green City Growers. And so he and I partnered, and I'm the creative director for My Hungry Traveler. So I did all the web design. I am doing all of the kind of writing and copy editing and marketing, and also the food photography, which has been so much fun for me. Because I've been getting to cook the recipes, which I love, and the kind of visual arts part of my passion comes through, and being able to do the food photography. So it's like, I'm like having a blast with this. So we haven't really figured out how to monetize it yet. Realistically, I think we will release a cookbook in a year or so. Like right now, we're just trying to build an audience and like get people to try the recipes and give us feedback, and get followers, and kind of go from there. So it's been so much fun. It's been a great project through the pandemic as well, because it's a thing I can do remote with him. So we're doing a lot of meetings, Zoom meetings about it, and it's kind of this nice thing because it's home cooking. So it's stuff people can do if they're home, they're not want to go out, I got a lot of work done on it. Like when I was quarantined with COVID a couple months ago, it's like, oh, great. I can certain things where you're like, I'm happy that I'm working on something that's online,
Well, let me ask you, how is it working with your dad? Because I mean, look, when he has so much experience, I mean, and you have a great relationship, but how is it, now you're in business with your dad in essence. So how is it in regards of you come in with all this knowledge now, 13 years of knowledge of being in your own business and the good, the bad, and the ugly. But he comes in, he's a serial entrepreneur and a global traveler coming in with all this knowledge. How are you finding that sweet spot? Because so many individuals are partnering in their businesses with someone that's dramatically different in regards of culture, in regards of like education, in regards of just the knowledge that they bring to the table. And sometimes it goes well, and sometimes there's clashing. So how does it, and family-owned businesses, we all know the stories of family-owned businesses can go, if it goes bad, family members stop talking to each other. So how is it in regards of developing a relationship with your dad to start a business?
Yeah, it's been great, actually. So I think that we have a nice counterbalance of the skill sets being brought to the table here, because I have never developed my own recipe before. I have no experience with that. And so, the actual cooking and the recipes and like the core, I mean, like that's the meat of what we're selling. It's like, I mean, and selling is like kind of like an abstract term right now, but it's like, that's what we're providing. We're providing people with recipes that they can cook and enjoy. And he's he's the creator, he's the creative mind around that. And so, and I have a lot more experience with modern marketing and social media and kind of like MailChimp and different sorts of ways to engage audiences.
Yep.
And so and the aesthetic that kind of like a modern aesthetic. And so that's like not his forte. The recipe stuff's not my forte. So it's like a really nice collaborative mix, for sure. So it's been actually awesome. I didn't know, like, I know he's going to watch this. So, but I didn't know going in, like how, like if we would be like arguing over certain things or like how it's going to go, but it's been so smooth and easy. And like, I'm really looking forward to kind of where we can take this. Cause it's like, now that we have this, there are over 500 recipes on this database. And so it's like, there's so much stuff there and it's really exciting. And we're kind of showcasing different ways to combine recipes to do celebratory meals. And I can see us like kind of, like, how do we monetize it? He doesn't want ads. I'm totally all for no ads.
I'm with, yeah. The ads are annoying as all can be. Because you just want to get to it's like when I go to a restaurant and the menu is overwhelming, like I just want to be here with my friend to eat a meal. I go, literally like this constant like obnoxious menu is just like, it's just too much. So with engaging with like a online platform just to cook, people just want to cook something that's new, because during the pandemic, for example, people weren't going to the markets. I belong to a farm share, and literally every single week I'd get something like, I have no idea what this is, and it got me excited because I had to look it up. I had to get see what their origins and I'm like, what do I put it in? Which made it so exciting every week, because I got to be really creative with my cooking, where usually, if you go to the market, you're complacent and you do the same things over and over and over again, because you just know I need to eat and that's all. I just need to eat. And so it's interesting where there's like a way. So the question I wanted to ask you was, how does your dad create? I mean, because he's a foodie, he definitely has been cooking all along, but how does he even know? I mean, my mom's a chef. And so she went to school. This is the same thing. Like my dad and your mom would get along. I mean, look, I'm sorry, my mom, your dad would get along so well in regards of I go in the refrigerator, there's food, there's nothing to eat. My mom's like, wait a second. And then she creates, she does this thing. So, but your dad's taking it to the next level of cooking for overseas. Like, I mean, seeing things, and how does he get to that point where this American guy from Massachusetts is now looking at food in a way where he can create something that would be eaten by a person from overseas and saying like, yep, that's exactly what we eat?
Yeah, I think that a lot of it is from his personal experience traveling, and being able to kind of like understand fundamentally what makes a cuisine a cuisine. You know, like that was a lot of what we talked about. It's like, what makes African cuisine a cuisine? And then more specifically, what makes each region in Africa its cuisine defined? And so, you know, it's like you can get into kind of these like kind of details in terms of what influences a cuisine. And so the website like goes into a bit of like the history of each cuisine or recipe in certain circumstances, as well as like the influences, like, you know, it's on the ocean. So there's a lot of seafood, you know, it's on the it was on the spice trade, and it was occupied by this country in the 1600s. Or
Oh, I like
so
that.
there's a lot of like kind of like what are the like kind of interconnecting themes that bring food together, and he's just knowledgeable about it. And so, you know, when you kind of go into like, all right, I'm gonna like try cooking something from Senegal, and you know, you kind of can like look at where Senegal is on the map, understand Senegal's history, and then also think about what an American kitchen has in terms of tools and availability. And, you know, how can somebody in, you know, Ohio cook a dish from Senegal in a way where they can access the ingredients to make it, and they can do it with a home kitchen as it looks here. And so it's thought through, you know, and I think it's a partially from experience and then from research.
There's a one of my friends, Sarah. Sarah's another. She's like a foodie. She's a cook. She's the person that whenever someone is panicking in the evening, like, well, oh my God, I can't believe I have to cook for my family again. What am I gonna make? And Sarah's like, what? Tell me what's in your refrigerator. Tell me what's in your cabinet. How does one not panic? I mean, because there's so many people. You know, literally, because during the pandemic, people didn't realize, like, holy crap, I have to cook for them again. These people in my house are hungry again. And they've been hungry 3 meals. And so a breakfast in most people's mind, like easy, cereal or eggs, whatever's, pancakes. For lunch, okay, sandwich, whatever's. I go, but dinner is like a full on like, oh. And I mean, and I came from a culture where we had hot meals, all our meals were hot meals all the time. They were like freshly cooked every single day. My mom would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. She would cook everything's in the refrigerator. And that's the way that we grew up. But a lot of people were where it's newer, the newer way of like mom and dad both work. I go, kids are at school or at activity. There's food for them. I go, there's things that they can make, mac and cheese, but there's like, when you're in the house during the pandemic, it's home cooking all the time. And now because of course, all the different variants of the pandemic, of COVID, people are like, we're going back to like being home and eating together. But that whole entire creativity has been gone. So how does one go to you and not feel overwhelmed, thinking like, this looks great, the pictures look fantastic, I want to make that, but one, I don't have the things, and two, I'm overwhelmed. This is a lot of steps.
Yeah, so I think what's nice is we built this website to be able to be the search engine is really functional. And so, you know, I use it a lot. Like, I'll just be like, we want a fish night. So I'll just type in fish, and it's going to give me like every fish recipe on the website. And if you want to then, you know, search by easy, you know, you can just type in easy. I mean, a lot of times we're coming up with things where I'm like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, what's this like Mozambique spicy shrimp? And you look at the recipe and I'm like, oh, I have all that stuff in the fridge. That's great. For things that are more complicated, we have an integration with Amazon through Amazon where we've linked to ingredients that are more exotic.
Nice.
And so, you know, you can purchase this stuff online and get it shipped directly to your home. Ideally it'd be kind of from local markets, but Amazon has like a really great integration system for websites. So we kind of like built in the ability for you to kind of purchase things through the site. You know, we found like, you know, if you want to get like chili crisp, here's the link to chili crisp for your Szechuan cuisine. So that, you know, trying to make it easy for people for sure. But I use the site all the time. I, you know, just really like if I have a CSA share as well, a farm share. And so, you know, we get kale, I'll just type kale in and I'm like, what's in here for kale, you know? And a lot of this stuff is ingredients that you can purchase at the grocery store. You know, I mean, for the most part, the attempt is to make it easy for people. Some of the recipes do get complicated or have very specific ingredients that are from a cuisine, but those, you know, if you want to filter those out, you can just go easy or like easy and like intermediate, you know. But some people want to make a really complicated dish also, especially if you're doing a celebratory meal, you know. So like we just ate for Christmas, we had this Renaissance pie, which was this like 1300s Northern Italian pie that's a meat pie stuffed with tortellini and meatballs, like in custard. It was great. But, if you want something really out there, you can come to the site. But also, if you want just like a recipe for a simple fish with like parsley and butter, that's like a French traditional, dish or things like that, they're all there. And I'm having the most fun trying things from like Southeast Asia right now. I've been really enjoying like stuff from that region. But you can mix it up. You can,
I love
for
this.
New Year's, we had a meal for New Year's. Us and some friends had a meal that we had a dish from Portugal, one from Mexico, one from Iran, and one from Peru. And so it's like everything was from a different continent. It's like we'll just have, and it was a great meal where each dish was from a different continent. It could be really fun to do stuff like that.
I think that people are complacent in regards of what they're eating until they go on a holiday or they're like going to someone. If they have an ethnic group of friends and they're like go and they're like, what's this, which makes it a lot more fun for your taste buds, but also just started a conversation of like, when would we eat this? I spent before the Christmas holidays, I went to my best friend's mother-in-law's house and they made tortellinis, tortellings, as they call it. But it's like we were making tortellinis and they eat it for the Christmas holiday. And we made 1,800 of them. So when we walked through the door, she's like, I go, you are not here to play. You're here to work. I'm like, yes, ma'am. And it was just so much fun because all these stories of their youth started coming in. We were there for quite some time making these little things. I go, but it was just so much fun just to see all the generations that were there making this together and then just having a fun time and just laughing. And we were all exhausted. We're like, at the end, we're like, bring on the wine because we are tired. But it was just such a beautiful moment.
Yeah, food is great. Like food and gathering and cooking and like, I think for me, I've been in kind of like environmental sustainability for so long, and I'm so supportive of that. But I'm also like feel currently like pretty passionate about just like cultural and like interpersonal like health and wellness through like gathering, through food, through those kinds of things. Like I think it's important that people have ways to connect with each other, either in person or online. Like I think it's important that people connect over food and that like, there's a culture of sharing and, trying different things. And part of the site is also meant to kind of like open people's eyes up to trying different cultural cuisine. It's like an ambassador to kind of like this international, cuisine world that is accessible. And so that people aren't like, oh, I don't eat that kind of food, or like, I would never try, something from, Yemen. Like, but
I think
really,
that's just I always think that's like such a sad moment of time when I hear someone saying like, I would never, because I was told always where you try it. If you don't like it, at least now you have the right. You're filling your database as in you now know like you don't enjoy it, but you had it, you could tell why, etc. Or someone cooked it wrong. I remember having venison for the first time, and it was gamey, it was gross, it was like no spice, it was just disgustingly. I'm like, I go, poor Bambi died, and I'm not even enjoying this at all. This is horrible. And then I had it again at a French restaurant, and it was melting off. Yeah. It was just the most decadent thing. I'm like, well, it's the same. What's happening here? And they're like, I go, everyone cooks it differently. So now I don't just give it one try. I give it 2 tries because I need to know someone else could have made it differently in a different culture.
Yeah. And like, there's some things that might be considered strange to us that are not strange in other cultures. Like in 2019, I did the Eisenhower Fellowship Program, mostly for Green City Growers, and kind of met with a bunch of different urban farming organizations and municipalities all through Europe. And when I was in Sweden, I ate moose, and it was great. But it was just, at this event, I was speaking at this university, and like, they're like, here's your meal. And I was like, oh, what is this? And they're like, it's moose. And I'm like, this is delicious, but you got to be kind of open-minded.
Peru, have you been to Peru yet?
No, but I love Peruvian food.
Yeah. So in Peru, I want to have, because obviously wherever you go, you want to have the main meal. And I remember going to a location, and I was like, there's like a huge, beautiful, it was a former fort of some sort. And now they give tours, but they have like a nice restaurant there. And I'm looking around, like, I mean, I'm known as the wanderer. So like you always look up, you're like, where's she now? Looking up, I'm taking pictures, and I'm like, I go, oh, look at all the, I mean, look at all the guinea pigs. I go, how cute. I go, are they gonna be pets? And they all looked at me like, I go, oh, are we gonna eat these guys later? They're like, yes, because that's the main meal in Peru. And I'm like, okay, I go, we're on, and it comes to you, and it's in the food, and it comes to you on a plate, and you're like, all right, here we go. And it was really, really good. I'm like, I go, it's in Peru. This is the main thing where when they think about America, steak, and in most countries they don't eat cow. I mean, it's like it's sacrilegious. And so it is what it is. And I will always try. I mean, I've had eel, like literally where was like, we were in oh my God, where were we? South in Korea. We're in Korea. I go, and I remember we were in a street market, and then we went into this restaurant, and there was this tank of eels, and they're like, what do you want? We're like, well, we want to have eels. They're like, I go, okay. They reeled the tank over, and they're like, pick which one. And we're like, what? They're like, pick your meal. I go, because we want to show you that it's fresh. We're like, it's fresh. We trust you. They took it. They took it out of the tank. They put it in front of us, fork in the head, skinned it, cut it up, and they're like, I go, chew twice and swallow. Don't swallow. Don't wait too long because it's secreting. And if it gets stuck in your throat, we can't save you. We're like, what? What's happening? And mind you, we're crazy. And we did it. And it was good because it has all these spices. But it was the most surreal moment where like, what the hell did we just do?
Yeah. I mean, it's like those experiences are so great. I feel so grateful that like I had a family member that like brought these home to us, and that I got to experience this as a child. It was like, so just, I tried so much stuff. Like I just was able to be exposed to so much food early on. And so I'm so comfortable trying new things. And I feel like my existence is better for it. Like, I feel like I am, like, I think it actually makes you a better citizen, being like kind of more culturally aware around like not being, hesitant about cuisine from other places. As well as just like quality of life, like of being able to kind of have a broader scope of stuff that you try and you eat and cook. So I'm like such a fan. That's like why I'm so excited that I got to do this project. Like everything lined up so well for me to be able to work on this with my dad this year. And it's like, I'm so excited to be like doing this. It's just like, it's so much fun. I'm having so much fun. My husband is like eating a lot of food that I am making.
Honey, we're just testing this out. That's all we're doing.
He's like, another thing. I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta take another picture, so it's been really fun. A lot of friends, been able to have a lot of friends over and feed them and stuff like that. So it's definitely.
All right. Well, I have two more questions for you. I have two more questions for you before I have like the last question and then one more question. During this entire during the pandemic, I mean, we're in a pandemic. I go, you're building this up with your dad. How was it for you for the pandemic? This is a two-parter. And also you saw in Texas where there's a line of individuals like looking and waiting for food. You've been hearing it over and over and over again where the food banks are running out of food and people that are usually so charitable are hoarding things because we just don't know what's going to happen. With all your experience now being, again, Mother Nature's assistant, what happens now? What do we do? I mean, what is your prediction in regards of like going into this brand new year? What are we doing about the food situation? Not just like now, like we always think about internationally, it is happening in our own backyards. So what do you think should happen, would happen, could happen, et cetera? Like, I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So when the pandemic hit, I was still, running Green City Growers with the current president and my business partner, Chris Scrollert. And, we were deemed an essential business. Like it was important in many capacities that food still be grown, that farmers continue to grow food, that, for us, we started transitioning all of our school garden education programs into food production sites. Mm-hmm. So all those school gardens around Boston that we had been doing, educational engagement programming when the kids were now doing virtual learning, all of those started to produce food to go to food banks. And so, that was a huge a huge reason to stay open and stay operating was like, okay, we still need to make sure that food is being produced. And, I think generally like there was a big burst of interest in growing food at home for people who had the space.
Mm-hmm.
So, you live in the suburbs, you have a bit of disposable income, you're gonna like, okay, how can I actually have a garden now? Like I want to be growing food because I am scared to go to the grocery store. I don't know what's happening. And, for every person who does that, that's some percentage of their food that's coming from their own yard. You start to look at the availability of food for others who can't afford to have a garden, and like kind of freeing up availability there. And then, I think there's so many fundamental issues with food waste in the United States. Like that is, that's not, it's tangential to what Green Sea Growers did, but it's fundamental to kind of like the entire, looking at the holistic picture around sustainable food.
Yeah.
And so much food gets wasted. Like people are
It's
very
ridiculous.
so people purchase and then do not consume and throw out large quantities of food. Things are not considered desirable by grocery stores, and so food is wasted.
I think that's the one that bothers me the most. There's a dent in it. It doesn't look pretty. It drives me crazy. Dents in cans. Where someone told me the other day that I'm like, yeah, if there's a dent in a one of my friends has a new mom. She's like, I go, well, the doctor said if there's a dent in the can, it's poisonous to the child. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? That is the most absurd thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, well, you can find whatever you would like to verify whatever you feel on the internet, as we know. So, but yeah, that is a huge place. Like in terms of like the future of conversations around food, like we have to be focusing on food waste, like 100%. Like essentially, like urban agriculture is like one element of this, like could we be producing, let's say 5%, 10% of the food needed within a certain number of miles of the people consuming it, because that helps with fossil fuel consumption, that kind of takes and diversitizes agriculture, so you don't have a lot of the same issues with kind of larger agricultural operations, just really like with shipping and consuming. And so if there's a small percentage of that, if that's being optimized, then you can start to really look at food waste. That's the big one. That is so much food is getting thrown out that people could be eating. And that is like a really complicated net of distribution and like, kind of public perception is a big element there. So it's like, how do you convince people to eat their leftovers? People are scared, some people have hesitancies to eat leftovers. So it's like, and then, restaurant portions fits into that too. So it's like, it's really like, it's a big, complicated net that could lead to, an alleviating of food, of hunger in a certain amount of it. But I think that's the kind of conversation people should be having around food sustainability.
And I think that's one of the things where, this will not be our last conversation. This will be one of because I'm beyond, I can't even say like I am beyond blessed. Since April 2020, I started the podcast and I have spoken to 188 rock star individual businesses around the world, 23 countries. And there's so many connections of what you guys do. And so I want to have it where especially this year, I want to bring you guys together and have bigger conversations, because who better to have these conversations than the people that are doing it, that are in it every single day versus, and again, I'm not going to poo-poo my friends that are academics, great, but those that are teachers. And then there are individuals that you are in it every single day, hands getting dirty, the dirty jobs, getting it done. And I want more and more conversations where let's get groups of you guys together from different locations that you would have probably never met, but to have a bigger conversation in regards to, I'm just the catalyst of bringing you together, and I'm curious, and I'm just the curiosity that I have brings out the best of you guys. And so I love that you're doing what you do. I love that I met you. I love that I am able to see, I have another, I have one more question. I go, I'm so late. I have another podcast recording after you, but I'm so late for this one, but I have to ask this question. Dirt farming or the tanks,
hydroponics.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts?
Oh, I think they're both relevant. I think that one of the things that people try to kind of like go one or the other, but certain things are good for certain settings. And
Okay.
so it's like, in very urban spaces, when you're looking at rooftop production, things like that, hydroponics makes a lot of sense. Like when you're trying to kind of like optimize space.
Mhm.
If you have something like a corporate campus where
Yeah.
it's got like a sprawling lawn, there's like a lot of energy that's utilized by hydroponics. There's like
Yeah.
electricity and a lot of water use and it's just a very intensive process
Uh-huh.
that's not used by traditional farming.
Okay.
Um, but they're both really functional in certain settings, like something like a freight farm, which is indoors.
Hmm.
It's like lights, everything's brought in. Those things can be placed anywhere. And
Right.
so, like for certain settings where there's no sunlight, there's no dirt, there's no natural anything. You
Yeah.
can be producing food in something like that. So we're all like, I myself and Green City Growers are pro all kinds of growing systems.
Okay.
Like we think they're all like, they all kind of like come together to create a fabric of urban agriculture that leads to like there being urban agriculture, like of it being significant. So like I'm definitely an advocate for any kind of growing system as long as people are growing food in cities.
I love it. All right. That was good. Okay. All right. So now I have my last question. That was huge because I have a cupola and I grow, and last year, like since my dad died is like when I started like becoming a greenish, it's tan. It's like, it's not, I'm not there yet, but I mean, there are years that I'm rocking it and there are years that's nothing. And last year I had a really bad year, not enough sun. It was like, it was a bad year of just growing. I was so bummed out. So I was like, you know what? Enough of the dirt. I'm going to bring in a hydroponic, blah, blah, blah. And I just keep going back and forth. Do I do it? Do I not? So I just wanted to know from the pro. I needed to know from the pro. What do I do?
Do it.
Do it. All right. This is like, I'm going that route. Okay. So the last question I have for you, this is the last question I ask of everybody, no matter how many times you are with me. You'll always hear these two questions. Two questions, two different answers, please. Here they are. If you had a personal ask and a professional ask of anyone that's listening to you right now, what would be your personal ask and what would be your professional ask?
Okay. These are different, but connected. So I think my personal ask is like, I would love for people to try the recipes on My Hungry Traveler. Like it will give me great joy if people could go on the site and try the recipes and give us feedback, like message us and let us know what you like and what's working for you and what isn't. And if you have your own recipes that are traditional family recipes that you feel like would be relevant for the site, we would love for you to send them. That is like personally would give me great joy. Professionally, I would love if people would follow My Hungry Traveler. So we are on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and then there's also a newsletter. So depending on what your preference is for communication, I think that would be really amazing. We're trying to build an audience. That's like the number one professional thing that I'm doing right now is trying to build an audience for the site. So like if you just sign up for the newsletter or follow us on Instagram, that would be amazing.
All right. I still think that's kind of cheating, but I'll take it.
I mean, my life is like not much other than cooking right now. So I don't know, otherwise I'm doing, I'm also supporting entrepreneurs. Like I'm doing some entrepreneurship consulting.
Okay. This is see, that's a good one too. It's the whole time concept, the giving back, which I think that's one of the things where people keep forgetting. I mean, I'm a big, one of personal branding and mentoring are my two big, huge things over and over and over again. I was always taught by my dad, it's a sin. I mean, not just from my dad, like I always say this, I think it's more so because my dad is no longer here. I always say my dad, but both my parents have always advocated, like, why learn all these skill sets and not give it back to somebody else? Like teaching someone, giving them the shortcuts, that way they don't have to make the mistakes that you did. So I love that you're giving back and helping entrepreneurs in every single way. I think that's absolutely amazing in every single way. And so I'm happy I brought you back. I mean, I stalked you before, but I think you were just busy. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I go, Jessie, I want to have you on. I think now I know you were busy. You were super busy. But I do love that I was able to sit there and bring you back. And I mean, you're part of the minding your business family, which makes me happy. And I love that you're working with your dad. I think this is like, literally, I think that I say this over and over and over again. You cannot understand the business until you understand where the person came from. And full circle, I get why both businesses exist.
Yeah, it's definitely a story.
It's a good story. And mind you, we love your brother, and we love your mom too. Your mom, artist.
Yeah,
love your brother. Like I go, they're in there. And like love the hubby too. So we're loving the entire team. Yay. Jess, thank you so very much for taking time out of your day. I mean, I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Oh my God. I mean, again, you crack me up. You just crack me up. But again, whenever I go to Fenway, I smile because I know where this came from.
Awesome.
All right. Bye, my friend. Until next time.
Bye. Thank you.